Well, we'll get started. A couple things to go over, but thank you so much for joining us today for the Facing Career Change webinar. So I myself am Mohammed Mohsen. I'm a part of the class of 2022 for biomedical engineering, and I'm a member of the Recent Engineering Alumni Council, or REAC. So we launched about 3 years ago, and the council supports strategy, design, and implementation for our young alumni at Waterloo Engineering. The work is mainly focused in three areas: events like this one, giving back, and communications, all with the goal of fostering a strong, well-connected student and alumni community. Now, before I introduce the rest of our speakers, a couple housekeeping notes. This is recorded, and we will be sending that recording later. There is a Q&A box in the bottom, so if you have any questions as the speakers are talking, feel free to toss them, and then we'll go over the questions at the very end. And one last thing to go over is the land and territorial acknowledgement. So the University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral, Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is coordinated within the Office of Indigenous Relations. So with that, let me introduce our speakers. So Megan first.
Hi, I'm Megan Walker. I'm a 2013 management engineering grad, and I'm excited to kind of go over the career journey today and talk about all the changes that I've taken throughout my career.
We also have Kim.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Kadour, and I'm a class of 2000 systems engineering grad. I then did a master's in clinical biomedical engineering at U of T, class of 2002, because back in the day, there was no biomedical engineering undergrad. So I did my master's at U of T. And then I'm pleased to say that this spring, I'm graduating with a Bachelor of Education from Western with a specialty in math for elementary.
Great. And so we'll get started with Megan.
Great, thank you. So I'll talk you through my career journey a little bit before I hand it over to Kim, and then we can go through some questions. So a lot of my career journey actually began with the co-op terms that I took through my undergrad. Instead of sticking with one industry or one type of role through all of my co-ops, I really tried to experiment and try all the different industries and all the types of roles. That was a little bit easier to do in something like management engineering, because where everyone in my class landed, because on all over the map. So I spent time in manufacturing and supply chain and in some tech roles, in even some transportation roles, to kind of get a feel for what did I like. And I think one of the things reflecting on that now is it really helped lower the anxieties around moving roles and fields, and it helped me understand some of those parallels really early on. So out of school, I started at Toyota as a manufacturing engineer. I worked on the line working on the RX 350, which is one of their Lexus vehicles, and I was in the paint shop. And a lot of the really important things I had to focus on were, do we have quality vehicles? Are we within our costs? Is cleanliness, our maintenance fees kind of where they need to be? If we're launching new models, helping with that and kind of testing everything out before we launch a new model. One of the things that I think I've really taken from that through a lot of the other roles were a lot of times our Japanese advisors would come over to the factories here, and they don't speak a lot of English. So one of the things you had to learn really quickly was how to communicate with those advisors on the projects that you're working on or the initiatives that you're working on with anyone within your shops, and really learn how you can have communication without a lot of that language, with that language barrier in place. So using things like icons or diagrams, symbols, and really going for brevity with impact. I left that role and moved out of automotive manufacturing. Just the culture was not a good fit for me long term. I recognize there were so many great things that I was able to take out of that, and I think they've helped me gain future roles. But automotive manufacturing was not where I wanted to stay long term. So I actually chose to move into tech. And I think that was a really great move. I've been really happy with that. But it meant that somebody kind of had to take a chance on me because I didn't have a lot of experience in that type of role. I did have experience from co-op terms, but that doesn't count necessarily as much. However, I had someone who take that chance on me specifically because they were looking for someone to create new process where it didn't exist before, and that's what I did at Toyota. So I moved to D2L, and my first role there was as a release coordinator. And one of the biggest things I had to do when I first joined was help them move to continuous delivery for all of their customizations that kind of ship beside their product. And I had to build on all that process and started out very manual and tedious. And I actually automated myself out of that job, which is a little scary at the time. But I moved down and I kind of moved around a little bit, helping where I could here and there before figuring out where I needed to move next, which I moved into product management. I've spent the bulk of my career within product management at D2L and working on the different analytics products. And through that time, I've been able to do a lot of on-the-job training, kind of picking up where I want to grow my skill set, whether that's I want to learn more about the finance part of the business and being able to pick up a project there and really lean into that. I think I've been really fortunate that the leaders I've worked with have recognized that that's something that we can do. And I've had the opportunities to be able to pick up projects to keep building my skill set and be able to stay at one company and do that, which has been really nice. Um, the most recent career change was moving out of product management and moving into a role in product operations. And product operations is a newer field. Many of you are probably familiar with product management. In tech, you basically some people call it the CEO of your product. You have to really understand everything all about it, how to market it, how to get it out there, how to build it, how to design it, how your customers will receive it. And product operations is your customer is your product managers. So you really have to understand that whole product management world, which I had experience in doing. But you also had to understand operations. So product operations at D2L, it's a newer field. So a lot of companies do it a little bit differently. But what I've moved into is supporting our product managers, our engineering teams, our design teams in how to get our product to market, how to get it in hands of customers. And that's things like how do we build our roadmaps? How do we work day to day? Do we pull from Scrum or Agile? And what does that look like for us? Because we don't necessarily want to follow everything exactly by the book if that doesn't have the right fit. How do we do pricing and packaging? All of the operations about how our product actually moves. So I moved into that, and it was a difficult decision because I had been in product management for so long. I was comfortable with that. I had built out a team, but I actually had the opportunity to trial the role before deciding to apply, and then before deciding to actually accept the role. I was at the point in my team where I had hired a bunch of people, and it kind of just started to free me up. So I was about to pick up other work, and then they said, "Hey, do you want to help this person out who's standing up this new department?" They don't have any people in it yet, but we still have work to do. So I had the opportunity to trial it out, do some of the work, get to know the new leader that we had brought in, understand whether I really liked working with her and if it was a move that I wanted to make. And I did decide it was. So I think one of the big things that really helped me gain that role was the experience for the beginning of my career at Toyota. Because like I said, moving into product operations, you really need to know the product side of it, but you need to know the operation side of it as well. So it's kind of like I've turned full circle moving to this new role because I've been able to return to some of those operational places where I started, which I've really enjoyed. Since then, I've been building out the department, building up a new team, pulling different operational teams across the company together that make sense to centralize. And some of the things I've really learned about that is I'm not a proxy. I am now a proxy for a product manager. I'm not in that role anymore. So I can't just represent that. I need to go and do research and talk to the people who are still doing it. I have also had to really understand how I can be open-minded about how to apply things across industries. And that's kind of been a common thread all the way through. There's so many things I've pulled from all the different experiences, roles, fields, industries that have experience in and applied in a slightly different way. And I think that's really fun to do because you're able to see where you can be successful with something that you used in a different context before. And then the last thing is I really have relied on people taking a chance on me and understanding where I wanted to go and helping invest in my career. So that is one thing I try to do with I'm hiring where it makes sense to look for resumes where someone's coming from some part of another industry or a different type of role and it's not exactly what you're looking for, but you can start to pick up on some of those parallels, especially if you've gone through and you've moved across a couple industries or roles, you can understand where someone coming from a different industry or a different role has the same skills that can be applied and try to understand what needs to be taught instead. So that's a little bit about my journey and where I've gone. And I'll hand it to Kim.
And again, if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the question and answers box, and then we'll go over them at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Really interesting to hear your journey. Okay, so as I mentioned when we first started, I graduated from class of 2000 in systems design engineering, then did a master's in biomedical at U of T in clinical biomed. And really, I think it's because I always secretly wanted to go to medical school, but after a 5-year engineering degree, wasn't ready to commit another like 7 years. So I thought I'll do biomedical. So I'll talk a bit through my journey and how I ended up where I am. And I think really when it comes to career changing, Megan touched on this a little bit with switching industries or switching roles. I think it takes a number of years, almost 5 to 7 years to just kind of chip away at what do I like? What do I not like? What kind of resonates with me? What doesn't? So I think I had the fortune that I never went into my first roles with a view of a 30-year career. I mean, I don't think that's a thing anymore anyways, but I was kind of really open to opportunity. And I think that's a real key in order to kind of follow your career path is to be open to things that come your way and, maybe give them some thought and maybe follow them or not, but just be open. So speaking of being open, the one thing I said once I left school was the one industry I never want to work in is software. It's just not my thing. So the first role I got was in software. So basically I had moved to England with my partner at the time, who was also a Waterloo grad. And we went to Oxford for him to do a PhD. And I ended up talking with one of the founders of, it was his prof who founded a number of companies, and I ended up working in one of his startups. So I was employee number 7 at a software, medical imaging software company. And as you do with startups, you wear many hats. So I was doing testing, I was doing, trying to open doors for clients, I was doing a bit of marketing, all of these sorts of things. And I ended up starting the kind of product management department, if you will, talking about this idea of, working with customers and with sales and managing product life cycles and all those sorts of things. So I kind of call it my speed MBA, because being in a startup company, I think early in your career really gives you those opportunities to try things out, because there's often not a lot of huge expectation when you're forming a company. Everyone's trying to figure it out. And so people give you a lot of grace when you're trying new things. And I really appreciate that opportunity to try all sorts of things and kind of figure out what I liked and what I didn't like. And so through that process, we ended up getting bought by a company called CTI that builds scanners. And that company was in turn bought by Siemens. So I quickly went from little Oxford spin out startup company to big blue chip Siemens Medical. So I was fortunate to work on the merger and acquisition between the two companies. And that again gave me a little bit of a taste of what it's like to dabble in mergers and acquisitions and work with all sorts of levels within the company. And I started to get the idea that, you know, I do like the hands-on work, but I also really like the strategic high-level stuff and working with all sorts of different departments. So I kind of filed that away in the back of my mind as something to kind of keep an eye on. And through my work at Siemens, I really appreciated that they had this concept that managers within Siemens could work across industries, because obviously Siemens is a humongous company. And it meant that you would do the Siemens Management Development Program, which I got offered to do. And then you could be a manager in any business unit within Siemens. So it sounds a bit odd that someone in power engineering could move into medical, but because they really honed the way they did decision making and all sorts of processes, you could map those skills over. Now, it's not perfect. Obviously, if you don't have a medical background, you're going to stumble over a few things. But I would say that was a really big takeaway for me about switching careers and industries, is that there's a lot of on-the-job knowledge you have to have that you can really only have once you're on the job. And so later in my career, when I ended up doing more hiring and career counseling, I often would tell people not to be scared of the things that they don't know, because there's so many things they will learn on the job that you can't possibly know now, unless you happen to have done that exact role in that very similar company, in which case, you know, why are you moving? So again, I was kind of filing away that information. So I did many years of product management within Siemens Medical. And I got to the stage where I had been through a few life cycles. I was head of oncology software product management, and I'd done a few life cycles of the product. And I was starting to get to the stage where I felt my learning was kind of plateauing. I was doing well at my job, but I wasn't being challenged in the way I really wanted to. And I was starting to get the itch to be back in startup companies. So my husband at the time had finished his PhD, and we decided to move from Oxford, UK to London, UK. And I got asked to join as an executive on a startup company that was with this same founder that originally had got me into startups. And one thing I will say that really kind of threw me at the time was that my colleagues and my boss at Siemens were really initially not super supportive of my decision. So obviously it's hard when somebody leaves, but they were really making me question why I wanted to leave, because obviously it was going to be painful for them to leave a functioning team, because I had a lot of direct reports and a lot of products in my portfolio. And so like a piece of advice I give to people when they're thinking of changing careers is that it's not always going to be the popular decision for other people. They're not always going to be like, oh, you know, good job. Oh, what a great move for you. But don't let that deter you, because a good move for you is often not a good move for everybody else. So you will have some people trying to dissuade you, and that's not to mean it's not the right thing. Anyways, fast forward, I ended up going to the startup company, and it was medical imaging, but for pharmaceuticals, clinical trials. So I was back in somewhat familiar territory, but back in startup company, and my job was VP of business development. I did sales, product management, and started a European sales team. So again, I was building on my travel that I did within Siemens Medical and the contacts I had there, and translating it over into a new role and working with pharma companies. So building relationships. Also, I was working very closely with investors. So we were a VC-backed, seed-funded spin-out from UCL. And so there was a lot of investor relations, a lot of board meeting, management and board members, things like that. So that was completely new territory. And I would say that really scratched my itch for the learning, like steep learning curve, representing at the board. And I was fortunate to be able to hire a team and also have a hand in hiring the new CEO for the company. So again, I did that for a few years. And the one thing I found that I was taking away from that is I really enjoyed the people management side, which I had also enjoyed from Siemens. So I kind of filed that away. Okay, I really like working with people. And the one thing that I would say was becoming a bit problematic for me was the travel. So with startup companies, there's lots of late hours, and in my case, lots of travel. And it was starting to, just affect my balance in life. We were thinking of starting a family, all of those things. And I just thought, this has been really great, but maybe it's not what I need right now. And so we ended up starting a family. And so when I took a leave from that role, I decided that actually going back full time wasn't actually going to fit with new family life. So I decided to branch into consulting, which was totally new territory for me. I had no idea how it was going to go, but I thought I will give myself a year or two to try it out. And the nice thing was I had that connection of CEOs that I'd worked with before that I could connect with and say, hey, I know you guys are struggling on the product management side. I can jump in here and there. So I spent about 2 or 3 years doing that while we were starting a family. And I also found it really easy to do little things like marketing work. I would write pieces for publications. I would do some things for trade shows, news releases. And so that was a nice way to keep my foot in the door while I was trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And it did give me the time and space to decide what was next. So throughout that consulting work, I realized that when I would have the chance to go into some of the companies I'd worked with before and work with the executive team or teach about branding or product management, I really enjoyed the teaching element. And teaching had kind of always been in the back of my mind. I'd always kind of volunteered if there was like, oh, we need to teach the sales team how to use these new features. And I really enjoyed that. And I really missed being with people. So that was my big learning from consulting, is that the work is interesting, but I miss being with people. And what kind of would really fill my cup was when I would take the train from London, UK, back to Oxford to work with some more startups. And we'd have these awesome collaboration meetings. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm really missing from my consulting work. So I kind of kept on the consulting for many, many years as a bit of a side thing, just through the relationships I had. And I started doing career coaching for consulting and coaching some CEOs and executive teams in how they're forming in startup companies. So that was more working with people. And I really felt like I was making more of a difference writing PR materials was fine and I didn't mind that, but I felt that working with people got me a lot more engaged in the work. And so when we moved back to Canada after I'd had 2 more children, I decided that I wanted something more people oriented. And that led me to stay within medical, but move to the hospital. I also kind of decided that I wanted to give something back to the Canadian healthcare system and to have a chance to work in public sector, because I'd only ever worked in private sector before. And that was really interesting to me. So I worked in the hospital in the HR department in a really interesting team called Talent Strategy and Development. So it kind of took all the things that I'd been collecting in the back of my mind that I really enjoyed about my roles, working with people, developing people, leadership, collaboration. And I was responsible for doing, in the kind of different roles I had there, hiring leaders for the organization, doing some leadership training, emotional intelligence training, and also looking across the departments in the hospital and doing talent strategy. How do we bring people up through the organization? And then also I did a big management review of the whole organizational development of the hospital. So that was really, really different for me. And I liked that I wasn't in front of a computer a lot, because in my other roles, that was kind of something in my mind that I was like, yeah, I think a role not just sitting in front of a screen is something I'm really after. And so I guess the last piece to the puzzle for me at the moment is that sort of things were changing at the hospital, and I was only working part-time at the moment, and I decided to take a leave right before COVID, and that worked out perfectly. And it was during COVID that I was homeschooling my two youngest kids just for a few months. And I really decided, actually, I've always wanted to teach. I've always enjoyed teaching. And maybe the next step for me is to pursue this as a career. So I quickly started teaching some courses at Fanshawe. So I'm an associate professor at Fanshawe. And then I applied to do a Bachelor of Education teaching. So I've always been passionate about getting young people interested in math and science. As soon as they start saying, I hate math, like if I hear an 8-year-old say, I hate math, I have to jump in. And so that led me to do a Bachelor of Education, which I've just completed, and with a math specialty. So I know that's a lot, because I'm 25 years out of school almost. So yeah, hopefully you've found a few things in there that might, spark an interest or a question. But I would definitely say that it's important to not be afraid to quit something that's not working for you, because it may seem like the biggest thing in the world, but really, if you're moving towards something that interests you, there's often lots of opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise know if you were staying in your role. Now, obviously, there's all sorts of financial reasons that we don't just quit our jobs, but to not be afraid to make a change. Yeah, so I think that's me explaining my pathway, and then I'll turn it back over to the group for managing questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cam. All right, so I see that there's already a few questions, so we'll go right through them. And as people have more, feel free to add them in. So the first question that I'll go over was addressed to Megan, which is there anything specific you did to help convince the companies you were looking to move to take a chance on you, specifically the switch from Toyota to product management?
So when I moved from Toyota to product management, or to D2L, I didn't go directly into product management. I've coached a lot of people in the last few years around how do I break into product management, because it's really taken off. And I really think if you don't have experience in product management yet, join a company in another role. And then move into product management. We've a lot of people within the product management org at D2L started in another role in support and customer success as an engineer, and then moved in. So I didn't move directly into that role. However, I did switch industries, and I was just really honest about what my experience was and what it wasn't. They were looking for something very specific, and those were the skills I had. I didn't try to kind of stretch the truth at all, and I was very honest at that. And I got really lucky at that's what they were looking for at that time, which allowed me to make the switch. I also was able to lean on a little bit of previous experience from co-op terms, because I was early out of school, and I had a bit of a project near the end of school as well. That was my design project, and we continued that on a little bit. That was in that technology space. So a little bit of experience that I could pull from.
Thanks. So the next question, and it's not addressed to either one of you, so whoever is comfortable, is did you have a long-term plan on switching careers? How many years to plan and how long do you stay at each position? And is switching too often like too good of a look on resumes versus not? So kind of a loaded question or a multi-part question. Oh, sorry, Kim, you're on mute.
There. I did a lot of hiring for startup companies, but also at the hospital, like many hires, and being in HR, and went through thousands of CVs. And I would say that anyone who's been in a role for 6 years or longer, I had a concern or question about. So that was kind of the tipping point of, okay, if you've been doing this same role, same job for 6 years, then we'd be asking in the interview, like, tell me why you haven't moved or changed. And so that, like, I think, yes, if you're moving every 2 years, that would be also a flag. You would want to see someone staying at least 18 months, or you need to explain it. Obviously, there's things that happen, but 6 years, I think, is a good target. And in my roles, I was from startup companies, sort of 2 years, because then we got bought, then 6, 7 years at Siemens, and then about 3, 4 years across my consulting and the startup company again, and then a number of years in consulting, and then about 2 years at the hospital.
Another question related to timing, about how do you know if it's the right time for a career change? Is there even a concept of a right time like that's applicable here?
I can start there, and then Kim, you might have some great things to add. No, there's never a right time or the perfect time. I was trying to manufacture the perfect times for a lot of the moves in my career. I actually moved into what I considered a cushy, relaxed role, thinking, okay, I'll start a family in this cushy, relaxed role. And then I quickly got pulled into product management, so I had a quick stint in another role. Thinking that that was what I wanted to do. And I was trying to kind of manufacture it all around. And really, you don't know what's going to happen. A lot of things kind of opportunities come up out of nowhere, and it's the right time to just take them. And then other times you want to see something through. I didn't want to leave my product management role on analytics products specifically. I didn't want to switch products because I was seeing something through and I wanted to see that all the way. So sometimes it's just this opportunity comes up, and other times you need to kind of see some things through, and you definitely can't try to make it all work out yourself.
Yeah, I would just build on that to say that, yeah, there's never a right time, especially if you think it's the right time, then something happens and it's not. Um, but usually I I have the view that it's better to move towards something great that you're trying to do than move away from something painful. Because if you're trying to move away from something painful, you might do that successfully, but you might not move into something better. So if there's something about your job that you really don't like and you really dislike, I think before making a major move, you need to find that hook to the next great thing first, rather than just say, I'm really tired of this and I need a change. That may be true. You may need a change, but I think you'll find it more rewarding and you'll get a better next move if you pick something that you're moving towards. Um, yeah, and I think also with finding what that is, I normally, in the coaching that I've done in the past, talk about creating like a vision for your life kind of document, which is like a one pager of where I want to be with family, my relationship to money, what my weekends are like, all of those things. Because when you're making a decision on a move, you need to have something to match it up to. Like, does this align with my plan? And if it does align, that's probably a good move. If it doesn't align, maybe it's not a good move. So I think without that kind of structure plan, either written down or in your head, it's hard to decide if something's a good move or a good time.
Next question, I think both of you can address, but from different sides. And it talks about how during career shifts, it's difficult to build a resume that suits a job opening for that new career. So how would you build a resume and still use existing work experience? And I know, Kim, you mentioned you've reviewed resumes before when hiring, and then Megan, you've applied. So maybe you can speak to both sides of this.
Yeah, sure. I can start. I mean, when I'm looking at CVs, like hundreds of CVs, it's got to stand out. So I'm not looking for the nitty gritty details of the worked on the 4.5x something, if you're exactly moving to a competitor company, then that makes a lot of sense. But if you're moving industries, you want to talk about size of projects, like how many employees, what was the revenue? If you manage a P&L, how big was the P&L? Talk about if you're involved at board level decisions, if you're involved, what's your customer base? Those are kind of things that you want to build out in a CV, especially if you're moving industries, because as I mentioned before, when I was hiring for the hospital, so hard to find good people that are reliable, have project management skills, who can talk to people, who can manage difficult conversations. Those are huge transferable skills because the work that we did in the department, no one's going to know that. Nobody knows our hospital systems and processes. I can teach you that, but I can't teach you how to be a person in a team. So highlighting those things, I think, is really advantageous. And obviously, being an engineer, you're basically saying, I can solve problems. So highlight that. I am an expert problem solver because all businesses and industries have problems.
Yeah, definitely. I think leaning into your cover letter, too, to kind of explain yourself. The highlighting the like, this is how many dollars I saved, or this is how many, like using those numbers is important. And then learning the language of what you're trying to move into. So if you're switching industries and you use a different vocabulary for describing your work from one industry to another, switch the words around. You're still describing your experience, but in words that the hiring manager is going to pick up on a lot more.
Right. So the next question goes a bit more into interviewing. So it goes, when interviewing for roles in a new field, how would you respond to interviewers asking why you made the switch?
Megan, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I was leaving a toxic environment and I didn't really want to talk about that in the interview. You don't want to bring negative things to the table. So I tried to switch and talk about what I was looking for in a new role opposed to what I was leaving. And even if you're just trying to escape something old, to move into something new, you need to, like Kim even mentioned, you need to kind of take some time and think about what you're looking for in that new role. And those are the things you could answer that question with.
Yeah, I would echo that. Talk about the greatness you're moving towards, and talk about how you've got skill A, B, and C that you want to use more. And you thought, I also think honesty, I mean, obviously, I agree with Megan. It's never good to bring in kind of why you're leaving, because I've heard that discussed at length in interviews, and then that's a big no when we hear all the talk about why things were problematic. So stay positive and also be honest. I had people say, I've just been in this role for a number of years, and I just woke up one morning and thought, it's time. Like I've done this and I've enjoyed it, and I just want something new, and that's okay.
So someone else also asked something similar, but they were asking more about how do you explain or tell a good story about your varied interests, your career path, and moving continents to future employers beyond just the transferable skills portion that like the rest of us speak to.
Yeah, I guess with that one, I would say that don't underestimate how interesting you are.
Mhm.
So people, I think, often put on a very, we have to have a professional front, but people are interviewing you for someone they're going to work with and like go for coffee with, and talk about your kids or starting a family or pickleball or 10 is whatever you do. So don't underestimate how interesting you are to people. So if you're moved continents because of whatever, like, you know, you can craft a bit of a story about your personal journey, and that brings a bit more interest to the table other than just, here's my skills, here's the jobs I went to, because you're going to be a person in the team, probably with that person as well, and they want to hear about you.
There's another question about how do you deal with the potential pay cut or like the move to more junior roles when you're switching to a new field, like going from mid-level digital marketing in a corporate profession to an NGO or a think tank where you're an analyst.
That part's hard. I think that one goes back to the question earlier about like, when is there a good time? So if you know that it's going to come with a pay cut, you're going to need to think about whether you're in the financial circumstances that will allow for that, and kind of where you are in your career. But if you're confident that that's the next direction for you, I think that's worth it when you can make it work. So I definitely had to take a pay cut switching because I was switching industries, and I think that's a big one. I think a lot of people, depending on how significant a shift it is, you're taking that cut, and you just need to think about the right timing, and the things you're going to get out of it, and have a bit of a plan for how to get there.
Yeah, it's hard. Taking a pay cut is always hard. Harder when you've got a family, a growing family. Maybe easier if you've got a partner where you can balance off, like someone's got something really steady, so you can take a bit of time. Like when I did my Bachelor of Education, it was 2 years full time. I wasn't willing to dribble it out over 6 years part time. Thought, no, I just want to like get this going. So we had to make sure that we had some things in place. And my husband was in a stable role at the time. So, but it wasn't easy for sure. But I think that's more of a timing issue. Absolutely.
So one of the questions here talks about how, aside from not fearing what you don't know when you first start out in a pretty new field, are there any other tips that you might offer to someone when there has been a chance that's been taken on you for you to work in that new field?
Networking for sure. It's hard. You feel like you're kind of like drowning, and you don't know all the words, and there's all these abbreviations. It's really hard, and that's not just about like, I mean, you see that if you just move companies and you're same type of role, it's hard at first. But I think finding some networking. So there's really great Slack groups around now for whether that's a topic or a role. So that there's lots of resources there, and where you can just kind of you can ask the stupid questions there. You can find people who can really help you get through that beginning phase where it is hard. And it might be a little scary at first to kind of get up to the pace with everyone else.
Yeah, for sure. If you can have at least one other person that you connect with that's done a similar kind of move, and you can kind of check in with each other. The other tips I would say is keep a record of your successes, especially like throughout your career. So when you're having not great days, you can look back at those and be like, these are the great things I did. But specifically in the first 6 months of your career. So when 6-month point hits is when people start to feel like I should be further than I am right now. And so you want to be able to look back at the last 6 months and say, yeah, but look at all the things I did in the last 6 months and how far I've come. A good manager should be giving you a 30, 60, 90 day plan for how you're getting integrated into a new role. And not everybody does it. Not all managers are great at that. So make your own and review it with your manager so that you're not feeling like you've got the weight of the world, that there's all these expectations on you to be like up to speed and running by, week 10. If you say, okay, here's what I think is reasonable in 30, 60, 90 days, show your manager, and your manager might even say, well, actually, that's way more. We were thinking you'd only be here by then. So make sure that your expectations of yourself are realistic, and give yourself some grace. Most people are like just happy to have a new person in the role, and they hopefully will be able to help you manage those expectations.
Did you ever have an imposter syndrome moment when you switched careers where you considered going back to your old job or field? Or what did you do to overcome this in that moment?
100%. And often, especially when it gets hard, the last couple years building out a new department for product operations at D12 it was really, really hard. And a lot of times I'm like, hey, can I just go back and be a product manager again? That felt so much easier. I think no, going back to if you've written down like these are the things I'm trying to get onto this role, if you've got a bit of a vision or you've got any of that written down, that's really helpful. If you've filed away some of those good compliments you're getting in your role, that's really helpful too. And then having that confident to talk to, I think is important, who can remind you why you've made the change and what you're trying to go after.
Yeah, I would say always am having imposter syndrome. Every new thing I do, especially being like going to teachers college and being 47 in a class of students who are 22 to 23. So, imposter syndrome all around in all the roles I've done. I would say, really just feel those feelings. Yeah, I feel like I don't belong here, or I don't know what I'm doing, and just keep on. So feel it all. It's not going to go away. And that's the thing that surprised me. I thought, oh, as I get further in my career, I'm just going to be, nailing it and be like, no problem, not scared of this. Wrong. I'm often, nervous or concerned. So now I'm used to it. Oh, yeah, that's the feeling. Doesn't mean I'm not capable or good at it. It's just a feeling, and just keep going. So I wish I could say that goes away. Maybe for some of you it will. For me, it doesn't.
And this question is actually related to your switch about teaching. It talked about how when making the switch into teaching and pursuing your new bachelor's, did you quit your current work position? Because this individual is debating switching careers, but then unsure about quitting and taking on the debt to further pursue education.
Yeah, it's hard because now the good news is it's when I did it, it's 2 years. It's now switched back to like a 1 year program. So sad for me, but good potentially for you. Um, yeah, so I had already taken on this associate professor role at Fanshawe, which was part time. So I already downshifted a little bit to test the waters and see how that would work. But it is tricky to just quit. It's a risk, right? If you quit to do something, you have to give up what you've already done. So my view was that this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. In my view, there wasn't really any other way to do it. So it was kind of the only choice I was left. And my only safety net was to try it first. So that was hence starting at Fanshawe. I was like, if I'm really going to teach, I think I need to make sure this is something I really want. So I kind of did that as a downshift, and then I quit and went full time teachers college. But of course, getting a degree, there's a way to, I'm not going to be out of work forever. It's a 2 year blip, but I really did have to plan that financially with my family. Oh, and the nice thing about teaching is they're so really in need of supply teachers. As soon as you've started teachers college, you can tutor online, you can supply teach. There's all of these opportunities. I mean, it doesn't fill a big hole of a full-time salary, but there's lots of things you can do to help.
When talking about the planning bit, the one person asked, what steps should someone take to initiate a career change? Would that be creating a plan, researching? And so I guess for Megan, what steps did you take when you were going through your career changes?
Yeah, so the most recent one is maybe what I'll touch on. So moving to product operations, I didn't know what it was at first because it was new. It wasn't something my company had. So I did a lot of research on LinkedIn, looking for experts in the field and then reaching out to a lot of them to see if they'd be willing to chat. Um, Looking for books, looking for resources, articles, newsletters, just kind of diving in and doing a ton of learning to understand what I was getting myself into. And then talking to some people I worked with right now too, because I was standing something up new at an existing company. So I wanted to know how is it going to be received? How is it supported by leaders? So understanding the space and then understanding the people around it that I'd actually be working with.
And so a more, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kim. Anything?
I would just echo that. Yeah, talk to people and find out what the actual day-to-day job is. Because some people will talk about their roles in a very kind of magical way, talk about the highlights. I get to delight customers every day, and that all sounds great. But you wake up in the morning, you go to your job. What are you doing every day? And make sure that you find out the real details of the nuts and bolts of the job.
I guess in both of your experiences, what are some common technical as well as non-technical skills that you've seen that are transferable to different career segments?
Kim, you touched on some earlier. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I would say any kind of teaching or training experience, because that's going to be required in any role, bringing on new people. Critical thinking, problem solving, and often I describe in interviews is I'm really good at synthesizing lots of messy data and messy problems, whether it's how to organize a classroom and materials, how to organize people at a conference. I think as engineers, we're really good at seeing behind things and around corners and making sense of chaos. Awesome transferable skill. Project management, leading teams, leading meetings, keeping people on track. And also, this is often an underrated one, but influence, having good influence on people, not in a negative way, but like getting people to buy into things. So if you've got that as a skill set, definitely talk about that in an interview.
Yeah, influence without authority is the big one.
Absolutely. Project management 101.
Yeah, change management I'd add to that. And then any analytical skills are so, so critical.
And then one more question that I want to go over because we are approaching close to the end of it. So this one talks a bit more, I guess, related to Megan's experience and talks about how do you find it different in the Canadian job market and employers compared to other countries in terms of HR norms, cultures, value credentials, compensation, things like that.
I think you mean Kim on that one, since
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
on
Yes.
it. Yeah.
I was looking at the
No
question
worries.
and was right.
Yeah, so I would say that, I mean, I worked mostly in Europe and hired in Europe and India. Um, I would say that in Europe, you get more vacation. That's just a thing. So moving back to Canada, you kind of had to argue for matching that. Cultural norms, totally different, whatever country you go to. And Siemens was really good at giving you cultural training for whatever different countries and people you'd be working with. I think that's hugely important to, especially when you have multi country and diverse teams, to be respectful and to make sure that you're not accidentally offending someone or that you're including all the correct terminology. And then in terms of compensation, I think, and values, so degrees are viewed very differently in different countries. So some countries would be like, yeah, okay, well, a PhD, that's not as interesting to me as your work experience. Whereas other countries would value a PhD quite highly. Like I would say in Canada, we value a PhD quite highly. It's not necessarily the same in other countries. I mean, it's interesting, of course, it's valuable, but it might not be enough to kind of secure your role if you're up against someone with a lot of great work experience.
Well, we're very close to 8 p.m. So I just want to thank you both for going through all these questions and going through your experiences and your career changes. Hopefully the audience, or at least one person, finds it helpful, because then it will be meaningful. So thanks again. And one last thing that I want to kind of touch on is, again, thank you everyone for joining the Recent Engineering Alumni Council's virtual webinar. We do have events in the future. We're going to do a trivia event in person in Toronto in July on the 17th. And then there will also be a Blue Jays night later on in September. So there will be emails about that, just like this one in the future. So look out for those. And again, thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a great evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much.